Hello and welcome. Thank you for being here with us today for another weekly discussion on the MBA application. I've seen quite a bit of interest from applicants for this session, so I'm really glad to have to be here and welcome in whichever platform you're watching us, whether that's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Sorry, I forgot that this is mainly on YouTube. Just as a reminder to everyone, if you have questions specifically to you, please write your questions in the comments in whichever platform you are joining us. I'm excited to talk about round one versus round two, or any other question that you have in terms of your application submission. So for those of you who do not know me, I am Susan Berishaj, founder of C Admissions. We focus on supporting applicants through the MBA application journey, beginning until end, really helping them identify the value that they bring to the table and present that in a way that resonates, that is genuine to who they are, but also resonates with the MBA admission committee. So if you're interested in having a conversation about how SIA Admission can support you, I invite you to register for a free consultation with me. We talk about your application and we talk about the rounds you should apply, your competitiveness, and what are some of the things that you need to work through. And then we can also discuss, of course, ways that we can support you on that journey, and if it's an alignment. I'm a firm believer that the coaching element must be in alignment, because it's a long process, from beginning until the end. Next week, we're going to move actually to the interview component. So I invite you to join me next week so you can start thinking about what the interview process is going to be, especially if you're applying in round one. But even if you're applying in round two, you do need to start ruminating essentially on how those interviews are going to go and the preparation process that's required. So I invite you to join that as well. Okay, we have quite a bit to cover, a lot of questions that came in, and we're going to try to answer as many as possible. So I have put together a few slides just to make sure that we are, that I'm anchored essentially on the discussion, and then, of course, invite you to write your questions in whichever platform. I'll keep monitoring my other screen over here, which has, the comments, and stop where I am to answer some questions in the process. So let's dive right in. So a few things that I will be covering are some of the deadlines that you need to keep in mind, trends, and who should be applying in round one or round two or later. And then the Q&A is going to be afterwards. So just as a reminder, what does round one, round two, and round three mean in terms of deadlines? So generally speaking, and there are schools that have nuanced differences, so just bear that in mind. But generally speaking, when we talk about round one, it's typically September deadlines, and some schools early October. When we talk about round two, it's typically that first week of January, but it can stretch all the way to the end of January. And then round three would be around March, essentially. So this is the time frame that you should be thinking about in terms of when is the good time frame for you and your application. What are some trends? So most schools obviously have 3 rounds. There are some schools that have 4 rounds. There are some schools that also are part of the consortium, so they have 2 additional rounds. But when we just think about generally, we have 3 rounds, and we talk as coaches in this space, we talk about these rounds as sort of like in absolute terms. And most people are going to apply in round 1 and round 2. That's typically the bulk of the class. About 80 to 85% of the class is made up of those 2 rounds of applicants. There are schools that obviously have round 3 as well. I typically don't suggest applying in round 3. The chances are very slim in terms of being admitted. And by that point, if you are rejected in round 3 and choose to reapply again the following year, you don't have enough space in terms of development of your profile before resubmitting your application. So round 3, as I mentioned earlier, it's around March. You will know by June if you're admitted or not. And the next round, the next application cycle for round 1 starts in September. So you have essentially 3 months to put together a stronger application than you did the first time around. So my recommendation generally is to stick to round 1 or round 2 application submissions. Some of the trends in terms of what does it look like for, like, who are the people that are really applying in round 1? These are really individuals who are very organized and have been thinking about their MBA journey for quite some time. They have planned in advance. They've prepared for their exams in advance. They have worked on their applications in advance. So typically that's the trend. Now, that does not mean that round 2 people or round 3 applicants are not organized and not ambitious or anything like that. It's just a different kind of preparation, people who are comfortable with the long-term game, essentially. So those are some of the trends. So advantages of targeting round 1. There's slightly higher admission rate. However, this can be debated in terms of, are the applicants who are really applying in round 1 just more organized, more structured, have done all the preparatory work in advance, and typically the pool is stronger. The pool of applicants is stronger than in round 2, or is it just more admission? Typically, my inclination, my hunch is that it's really more that organized applicants that have done all the work in advance that result in the higher admission rate. Of course, if you are admitted, you'll hear me mention this a couple of times today, because it's a really important thing to keep in mind as you're going through this process. You have to be admitted first, then to think about scholarship, and then to think about all the other pieces, right? So those who are applying in round 1 are successful at gaining an offer of admission, also have a higher chance of scholarship, provided that, of course, they have strong academic performance, strong tests, and obviously progress in their career. Here I'm talking about merit-based scholarship, not need-based. So that's what that component speaks to. And obviously the advantage of being done by December, right? Meaning by December, first week, second week of December, you would know what the decision is, and you can start the new year afresh, not stressed out, not thinking about your applications, and really move into I'm getting ready for my MBA mindset. And then also, of course, for most of the schools, once you are admitted, you are put into this pool of incoming students, and you can start connecting and networking with your peers so that you can build those bonds and really get excited about what's to come. Who should apply in round 1? Obviously well-prepared candidates. Like I said earlier, it does not make sense to submit an application, especially if you haven't put together, if you don't have a strong test score, a strong, presence in terms of what you have put together of your candidacy, what values you bring to the table. If you are not there yet, and you haven't done anything yet, it may not make sense for you to apply in round 1, just because September is literally a month away until round 1 for M7 schools. That's what I'm looking at here. Individuals who should also consider round 1, and that's, maybe you are here, a year ahead of your application. So you're already thinking about next year, round 1. So this is great. Round 1, applicants that are applying in round 1 obviously are going to be individuals that have highly competitive profiles, that you want to make sure that you are securing your seat early on. International applicants can actually have an advantage in this. I can't stress, obviously there's elements that you can't control as an international applicant, but I have seen many times, even with round 2 applicants, that sometimes because of embassy regulations in your local countries, sometimes there's a challenge in terms of getting that appointment and being able to secure that visa, that student visa that you need in order to come and study to the United States. So targeting round 1 early can be beneficial in that regard. Again, nothing trumps a strong application, because without a strong application, there is no admission to begin with, right? So then obviously don't waste your time in submitting in round one. Candidates also, their applicants sometimes want to target a range of schools, and this sometimes means that they want to apply to some more target and safety schools in round one, and then want to have a chance to also apply in round two for additional higher ranked schools because they've improved their test score or whatever the case may be. That makes sense as well. The caveat that I would give here is applicants who make that decision should be mindful of the fact that if you're applying in round one, you're going to know by December, the first week, second week of December, what the decision is. You have to give them a final decision by January, typically. And you won't know your round two decisions by that point. So typically you have to make that deposit. And if you change your mind, you get an offer somewhere else that's higher ranked, then you lose the deposit. So this process is very expensive, and I always recommend that you apply to your pool of schools in one round, just because you can save on those components. However, if you want to really feel secure, then applying in round one to some of the target schools, and then stretching that target list for round two can be a great way to break those down. You're not going to do this for round 2 and 3, so this doesn't apply for round 2 and 3, but it applies for round 1 and round 2. And then obviously our applicants seeking scholarship that have strong applications, strong test scores should apply in round 1 because it increases their chances of being admitted. It increases their chances of having the ability to negotiate scholarships as well. Disadvantages of targeting of round 1. I hear this way too often when applicants talk about, well, I want that scholarship, so I just have to submit by round 1. And I will bluntly say that's an erroneous way of thinking in terms of, reality is if you don't have a strong application, if you don't have strong test scores, competitive test scores, right? The chances of you being admitted are slim, and then there's no scholarships to think about at all, right? So put in your application when you have the quality application that can get you to where you want to go. So those individuals who should be targeting round 1 are applicants with strong profile and ready applications, competitive test scores, as I mentioned. Individuals who are targeting private equity, venture capital in terms of their goals, those are typically smaller pools of applicants. Those should also target round 1. I will say that I have helped applicants get in with these goals in round 2 as well. So just bear that in mind. And then overrepresented candidates can also benefit from targeting round 1. Again, only if point number 1 is true. So advantages of round 2, you have more time to refine your application. This doesn't mean that you should leave your application until December. It just means that if you are sitting here watching this video on August 1st, or within a couple of weeks, or maybe even a month from now, you have some time to develop your profile and really strengthen your application by the time you hit your submit in the first week of January. So that can be an advantage in helping you strengthen your profile. Sometimes this also means that you can strengthen your profile from the perspective of opportunities that you have in your job. Perhaps you are getting a promotion and you have a chance to demonstrate your skills in this new job for the admission team. That can definitely be an advantage in applying in round 2, especially if the experiences up until now have been less leadership focused. For round 2, even if you decide to postpone, I don't want you to think that you can't get scholarship. You can. I have had applicants get full rides in round 2. So there's definitely an opportunity for round 2 submissions as well. Again, quality trumps the round that you apply in, right? It's the quality of applications. And there's relatively equal chances of admission. I'm a strong believer in that. You hear that also spoken about in the admission from the admission teams at top-ranked M7 schools. If you have a strong application, you do have equal chances. Now, of course, this is an election year. We don't know what's going to happen. There are always turmoils that can happen that sort of swing things in one way or another. But just generally speaking, you have relatively equal chances of getting admitted in round 2. And then you also have time to take the GMAT or the GRE, especially if your score is not reflective of your capabilities. Round 2 applicants should be for individuals who need the time to prepare and have put together, obviously, a strong application, strong profiles. It's true at all times, no matter which round you're applying, but especially if you're going to later rounds, you need to have an exceptional application. International applicants are still okay in applying in round 2. So if you're an international applicant and you are worried about your visa, but your application is not ready, I will say postpone to round 2. You can still get all of those components done, but you need the strong application to even get the offer. So don't rush your submission. Also, candidates who want to apply to multiple schools and really are not inclined to be comfortable with putting deposits here and putting deposits there until they get the right school. Round 2 can give you the time to put together 5-6 applications, especially if you start now. And then also applicants who seek scholarship, it's still okay to apply in round 2. You still have equal chances of the scholarships. So I think this entire component of the key takeaways of today's sort of presentation is to just remind you that it's not about the round between round and round 2. It's not about the round that you target. It's really about showcasing your strongest application, your strongest presence in terms of what makes you stand out to the admission committee. I know the test is something that many people struggle with. So that's one component, but the other components are putting together a strong application that's reflective of your unique contributions to the classroom. That's not something that most people are comfortable talking about it very quickly. You need time to think through. You need time to reflect it on a black and white piece of paper and be able to communicate it in a way that someone who's not you, who has not lived your experience, can understand. And that needs time, and then you multiply that by however many schools that you're applying to. So the point here is submit your application when it's the strongest presentation. That way you have the highest probability of getting in and not waste a year, because you would if you just submit applications. So what I mean by that is, if, for example, your dream school is Harvard, if, for example, your dream school is Wharton, and just insert any dream school that you have, and you want to apply in round 1 because that's your dream school, you want to tell them that, oh, I'm super excited and really ready for this. If your application is not strong, you lose the chance to apply until next year. So next application cycle. So be mindful of that when you're submitting, because you can't apply in round 1 and round 2, or round 2 and round 3. It's one application per application cycle that is allowed. Okay, so now let's move to questions. I'm going to stop presenting my screen, and I invite you to ask your questions on the chat. I have received several questions that have come in. I'm just going to move this over here. Okay, that have come in through the registration. So let's dive into those. All right. So the question that came in, it's, I'm not confident about getting good marks before round 1. Should I take coaching and try for round 1, or should I target round 2 when I have time to even have a consultant? Okay, so I think I understand this question. The question is essentially, my GMAT or GRE is not strong. Should I really try to still push for round 1, or push for round 2 when perhaps I can also work with a consultant. I will say, if you are not confident about your ability to get the scores, which also implies that you probably haven't done a lot of writing in terms of the rest of your application, at this point, I suggest that you target round 2 instead and really put together a strong application, whether that's with a coach or not. But if you're working with a coach, start as soon as possible and start the preparatory work. There's just a lot of different pieces, at least through my coaching process. There's a lot of pieces that are needed, not just about writing the essay, not just about writing your resume, that you need time to go through. So starting earlier, it's definitely going to be in your benefit, even if you don't know exactly yet which schools you're going to target. So if you're watching this, whether live or replay, I invite you to reach out for a consultation, and we can talk about your profile in more details. Yes, I do take questions. I see a question in the comment. Do you take questions here? Yes, I do take questions in the comments. So please write your questions, and I will respond to those as well. Until those questions pop up, I continue with the questions that came through the registration form. So if there is significant career progression, which is happening currently, would it make sense to call that out in round 1, or is it better to wait for round 2? Depending on where your applications are, the rest of your applications, it would, and the rest of your profile, to be honest, whether you apply in round 1 or round 2, that's going to be dependent on that element. If you feel that there's going to be significant progression, that it's happening now and can happen in the next several months, where you can speak with conviction in terms of your contributions, in terms of your impact, and you have recommenders who can do the same in terms of having the time to witness you in action, then I would say apply in round 2, because you need the person to corroborate. It's not like, oh, this is happening, and then at some point I will be able to reflect a little bit more. It's really great when the admission team can see you in action. So through the examples that you share and the examples the recommenders share. So if that's the case, then I would say apply in round 2, when you have the chance to go through this progress that's happening, have some kind of results that demonstrate that you are an impactful future leader, and submit a really strong candidacy. Okay, so the question is in the chat. I won't put it on screen, just to make sure that I keep your anonymity. So for Indian students, considering the competitiveness is high, is it better to apply in round 1 or round 2? If you are an applicant that has a strong application and can submit in round 1, absolutely submit your application in round 1. However, if you do not have an application that's strong, don't bother submitting in round 1, because you are in a competitive pool, but you have to be competitive within the pool of applicants that you're applying in. So that really depends on how strong your submissions are going to be. The materials, the resume, the essays, the application, portal, short answer questions, your recommendation letters, all of those pieces must be really strong in order to demonstrate that you are a competitive candidate. So you will have also a chance to gain admission in round 2 if that's not ready yet. Excellent. So let's go back to questions that came in through registration. How would round 1 versus round 2 for schools like Tuck differ from one another? I would say, if you are a strong candidate, I mean, the guaranteed interview component, it's of course beneficial, right? You demonstrate that you really are, serious about this process. You want to succeed. You want to demonstrate that you really want to attend Tuck, and you are doing this early. However, I will say this is, I've seen this quite often, when applicants really want to submit that application, but are not really focused on the quality of the presentation. So even if you have a guaranteed interview, if your application is not there, it's not going to mean anything, right? You still can be rejected. So focus on submitting a strong application. If you can get it by round 1, submit it in round 1. If you need a little bit more time, then do it for round 2 guaranteed interview. I think that would be the best approach. And if you need a little extra time, definitely take it and do the round 2. Excellent. We have 5 more minutes. So I'm planning to apply to a mix of dream, target, and reach schools, but I'm planning to apply to a few in round 1 and others in round 2. Does it make sense? Are there any disadvantages to this application? Yes. So I would say do try to apply all at the same time. I talked about it earlier in my presentation that if you are mixing rounds of application, you have to make decisions that require you to make a deposit for that given school. Now, it's always good if you can do that for like a target school, because it does change how you show up in front of the other interviews, the other applications that you submit afterwards. However, for most people, this is a very costly process, and to spend additional $2,000 if you're applying to U.S. schools and £10,000 to UK schools, it's not something that they had budgeted for. However, if it makes sense for you, then I would say apply to target schools where you can get yeses in round 1, and then apply to your dream schools or the reach school category in round 2, because if you get into Harvard or Wharton in round 2 or Stanford, then it's okay to waste that $2,000, but you just want to be mindful of those details. Yeah, so there's a question. So what extra needs to be done in those few months between round 1 and round 2, and how do we define what extra is to be considered for an interview? So it's a good question. So this depends on on an individual basis. Some people have really strong or weak, I guess I would say, weak leadership experience. So there's an opportunity to use this next couple of months to develop those opportunities, whether that's through having conversations with your supervisor, to even if you don't get a promotion, talk about added responsibility and be able to experience that, have some kind of experience that you're going to be able to share with outcomes once you get to the final destination as in the application submission. And if you don't have any extracurriculars, you have an opportunity to do that in the next couple of months. I know people sometimes are a little bit cautious in terms of don't show yourself that you only did this for the application. But the reality is many people have very demanding jobs, and it may not necessarily always allow that. It's better to have a couple of months of extracurricular activities than no extracurricular activities at all, right? So this depends a little bit on the individual. And if you don't have a test score, there's definitely the extra thing that you should be doing this next couple of months is making sure that you get the score that you need, whether that's completing the GRE, if that's the path that you've gone to, or you're switching to a GMAT focus. That's another thing that you need to be working through, in addition to obviously putting together the rest of your application. So the extra is really the person dependent. Excellent. Okay, one last question for the day before we wrap this up. So given my current workload, can I prepare my application more thoroughly by December? Which round would be better to apply? If you have a really heavy workload, I will say that applicants should start early because typically that doesn't change. And even applicants that I hear this every single time, every single year, applicants who tell me, oh, in December, my workload gets really easy, no one's around. And every single time when December comes, they have a crazy amount of workload that they did not anticipate. The idea here that I recommend that everyone go through this process of thinking is mapping out essentially what does the next couple of months look like in terms of your workload. How much time can you dedicate every single week, every single day to your application, whether that's studying for the GMAT, whether that's working on your resume, whether that's working on your essays or having conversations or any one of those components associated with it. Time flies really quickly, and you would wish you would have started earlier. No matter how early you start, everyone always says, I wish I would have started earlier. So use this time to make sure that you are mapping out strategically what these next couple of months look like for you in terms of all the responsibilities that you have, right? If you're taking the test, you need to take account for that. If you have a really busy workload, you need to take account of that because all of these have to happen simultaneously, and it's a lot, and you just want to make sure that you give yourself the most amount of time to have a successful submission, whether that's round 1 or round 2. So with that, I'm going to end this session today. Thank you all for a very engaging discussion, wonderful questions that you submitted in the registration forms. And if you are thinking about applying in round 1 or round 2 and want to start the conversation in the reflection around what it takes to get to the interview component, we will be talking about that next week. Whatever date that is. So join us next week on Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time live, or obviously you can always watch the replays afterwards. Thank you again, and I'll see you next week.